without further ado, I'm going to introduce Ben Christensen, who is the CEO and co-founder at Cambium, to talk about raising capital as a first-time founder.
All right, well, really excited to be here today. My name is Ben Christensen, and I'm here to tell you my truth about fundraising. So I'm the CEO and co-founder of Cambium, tell you a little more about that, but mainly here to talk about fundraising and also what it can teach you about life, or what I've learned from it at least. So I started out in New Haven, was a student here at the School of Forestry, graduated in 2020, started with an $18,000 Kickstarter, selling cutting boards out of my East Rock apartment. Have gone on to raise $29 million in venture capital. So really excited. We just closed our Series A couple months ago from some of the top investors in the world. You know, big names, Dangerous, Mac, NEA, one of the largest investors in the country, and a lot has gone into getting there. Just super quickly about Cambium, we're a supply chain technology company, so we make it really easy to source local materials. So we help big businesses who are building with wood source better, climate positive materials, and then we build software for the supply chain. So we help lumber companies, truckers, sawmills run their businesses more effectively. So we provide SaaS technology for them, and we create really big impact all along the way by helping to save wasted material at scale. So that's what we do, but this is not a presentation about Cambium. This is a presentation about fundraising. And one of the things that is, the biggest thing that I'll keep coming back to over and over, I'm going to talk a lot about the hacks and tips and tricks and the hard parts of fundraising, but the most important thing fundraising is building a successful company. So we've had some great success with some really big customers, and that's really the key to fundraising. I'll come back to that. So at the start, we built something pretty exciting, selling products into Amazon, working with some of the biggest firms in the country, raising $29 million. I didn't come from that world at all. Zero VCs. I knew nothing about raising money, had never fundraised $1 in my whole life. Just wanted to play this. This was an opening pitch, so this is kind of a little bit of a vulnerable moment for me here. So take 90 seconds and see how our first pitch went. I think this will work. Nope. Oh, it's PDF'd. All right, well, we'll have to come back to that. Basically, early days, we really didn't know about fundraising. But I knew a ton about climate, about forestry, and wood. I grew up in a rural town in New Mexico, town of about 200 people. My dad was a construction worker and a carpenter. And as a kid, I spent a ton of time in the trees. I always knew I wanted to address climate change, and really was focused on it from a broader forestry perspective. So I'm saying all of that to just really emphasize that you don't need to know a ton about fundraising in order to do that. So just a quick, trying to get a sense of who's in the room here. How many folks are thinking about starting a company? Hands up. Or are founders of a company? And what about funders, people who fund companies? Okay, a couple. And then folks who are in more of support around startup ecosystems, you help founders succeed. Great. Last thing I just want to say before diving into the fundraising, I just want to briefly share my thoughts on entrepreneurship and why I think it's important. And just to this is a call to action, particularly in this moment, the global context that we're in, is that right now, I think that at its best, entrepreneurship is something that is passion scaled. It's doing something that is compelling enough that millions of people want to see it. And I really believe that you should only be building a company if you have something wise to say to the world. We shouldn't just be growing for growth's sake. We should be really thinking about why we do it. So I think about that sort of through and through in everything we do. Wanted to say that on the front end because now we're going to talk about money and all the different pieces of that. So it's a hard thing. Raising money is hard. Entrepreneurship is hard. Supporting the startup ecosystem is hard. If you're thinking about doing it, do it. I will say for myself, it's been one of the most amazing experiences of my life. And if you're struggling, you're in a hard moment, you're trying to raise capital and it's not going well, stay in the arena. It's taken us a long time, and I'll share that. So getting into my experience and the truth about fundraising. So just quick level set for everybody in the room. There's a bunch of different stages of raising capital. There's obviously tons of resources on this. Generally, you have pre-seed, which is very early stage. You have an idea potentially, but often you're just really betting on a person. At the seed stage, you usually expect to have a company with an idea, some initial traction, a product of some sort, some initial customers. Series A, you expect to have product market fit, the elusive PMF in startup land, where you are selling to companies, you are selling to customers, you have a product in market, and more money in means growth. Series B and later stage, I can't tell you anything about. I don't know it yet. We haven't raised it. But really, you're looking at much less of a story and the potential and much more of what are the key dynamics that scale this business. So just wanted to level set there. Again, to be super clear, my company, Cambium, I have raised pre-seed, seed, and Series A. So I am actively learning and thinking about how do we get to the next level of fundraising. I cannot speak on any of that with expertise. What did we do? So what did we do as a company? How did we get here? So basically, started with a pre-seed round, and essentially each of those happened, we raised about one round a year. The first round, the first time I raised capital, again, I didn't know anybody, had no experience, and how many people here have ever seen the movie Friends with Benefits with Mila Kunis and Justin Timberlake? I know, strange ask. In that movie, Mila Kunis is a headhunter. She's an executive recruiter, and I was like, I'm starting to hire people. I don't know anything about headhunting. I don't know how to hire. People who do that for their jobs probably have a really good perspective on it. So I Googled like top executive search firms in America, found the first one, ended up clicking on their CEO, read his bio, shot him an email and said, hey, do you have 15 minutes in the next year to talk? I'm trying to hire people. I want to pick your brain about like these 3 questions. Would you take a call? He's like, sure. We talked for 15 minutes. That conversation got longer. We started talking every weekend. And he ended up becoming one of our key mentors from that. And in this moment when we were trying to raise capital, our first round of capital, I didn't know anything. We ended up talking to about 135 investors for our pre-seed, which is crazy. We have a very complicated business model. It's more refined now. We've got actual traction now. At the beginning, for those of you who will remember or heard a shout out this morning, we didn't win the pitch competition at Startup Yale while we were here. We got second, so still mad about that. But part of that was because our pitch wasn't that great. Like what we had was not that strong, and we were also coming from the wood industry, which VCs know nothing about, climate space, which people have different complex feelings around. And so all of that is to say, we really didn't have a ton at the beginning. And so that guy, John, who I had reached out to over email, runs the executive search firm, he ended up being our first lead investor, right? A totally random relationship. He was like, I believe in you. I will put the first check in. And that's how we started. We ended up raising pre-seed round. From there, we then raised a $3.5 million seed round, just to, again, highlight the trials and tribulations where if you look at my LinkedIn, you probably will say, wow, you're too active on LinkedIn. It's great for hiring. It's amazing how many people we hire from LinkedIn. It looks great from the outside. It's all rosy. It is not rosy. For our seed round, we were at 3 weeks until the company was out of money. We would have to lay everybody else off. We've been trying to fundraise for about 9 months. We've been spending tons and tons and tons of time. And again, part of that is complex business model, medium traction, some traction, not great traction, and some real challenges of being a first-time founder, not having the network, not having the credibility, not knowing how to speak the language. In that, we ended up getting an amazing lead investor. That totally transformed our company. We were able to grow. We then tried to raise a Series A. Didn't work. We weren't ready. The market said no. 2023, really bad time to raise. Again, we weren't ready. We ended up closing a seed plus round, so sort of an extension bridge round. And then this year, finally, we closed a Series A. So that's all to say, just like being candid with everybody, it's a journey, right? Fundraising is hard. It takes a lot of time. I'm not here to tell you that it's simple and linear and that it's all growth all the time. So that's sort of the moment that has brought us here. And a couple of things that I really believe and wish I understood more as a first-time founder are sort of the key fundraising dynamics. And there's a bunch of different ones, but these are the ones that I think about all the time. The first is just information asynchronicity. VCs do this all the time. You do it once. They know everything about what to do. You know everything about your company. And so fundraising takes some real knowledge and info gain. What I feel like I did really well in the first couple rounds is I took every meeting I could. Good VC, bad VC, small VC, big VC. I was just there to practice and to learn to balance out that information disadvantage. The second is 1 out of 30. So VCs in a fund, they need one company to really go 100x to return that fund. And there's different VCs with different fund mechanics, but generally that's true. They're looking for companies with big, big potential. You have to be presenting an idea that is big enough to get them excited. And the flip side of that is 1 out of 30. You can talk to 30 investors, you can talk to 100 investors. You just need one of them to invest. And so reminding yourself that when you get a ton of no's, you get no after no after no after no, that's expected. That is part of this game. And I think there's also this thing that happens because the only things you read about in the press, the only stories you ever see, the only people you hear talks from are people who have successfully raised fundraising rounds. There are so many founders, there are so many companies that have tried and failed. So there's just a real dynamic there if you don't actually need that many investors to like what you're building. And then the last thing, this is the way I see the world, this is the way I see fundraising. It's all about people. People, 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 people. This is all just a sort of people dynamic, and you'll see that through how I think about fundraising overall. Last thing I would also say about most funders, except for I don't think any of our investors are in the room, but if they were, I would say you're in that 2% outside of this. Most VCs, most funders are followers. A very common thing you hear is, we really like you, but reach out when you have a lead investor. And so what ended up happening is that all of the work, so much of the practice, so much of the no's comes at the front end, and then that last 10%, 20% of the raise happens really fast. So I usually say it takes 90% of your time and 90% of the effort to get the term sheet. The actual closing, bringing in the other capital is really easy. And so what that tells you, especially as a first-time fundraiser, as a founder is trying to do this, you're looking for the people who are willing to make a leap on you. You need the people who are in that 2%. So you're particularly trying to distill and understand who is going to be willing to take a risk, take a bet, who particularly understands and believes in your company. I'll also say it sucks. This is one of the most challenging things as a founder is you get a bunch of interest. People are like, wow, I love what you're doing. Bring in a lead and we'll put in $5 million. That's a no. That is just somebody saying no to you, but they're saying it nicely to your face so that later they are just creating an option for themselves. They're creating an option where if things go well and they like your lead investor, great, then they're in, they've got a position. If not, they're out. And that sucks. It sucks as a founder. So just to highlight, again, what I'm trying to really emphasize here, fundraising can be hard. It's not easy. Some of these dynamics are very difficult. All right. What I want to talk through are my fundraising principles. So I have 7 of them, developed them over time, and we're going to kind of go through each of these. The first, fundraising, again, everybody thinks it's fast, simple, easy. It's not. I'm an ultramarathoner. I am personally obsessed with how do you do hard things consistently over time, because one of the biggest things that kills companies, one of the biggest things that kills fundraisers is when you lose emotional momentum, right? You're working on this thing, you're trying super, super hard. No, you think you have something, it gets loosey in the football, then pulled away from you, and all of a sudden, you stop feeling emotionally connected to what you're doing. You stop believing it, you stop feeling excited about it, you stop being energized. That's what kills you. And so that is also true in ultra running. So I have spent a lot of time ultra running. That's me and my co-founder. We ran across the Sahara Desert last year, 156 miles. We've got 135 mile in 2 days in Alaska this summer. We do that to learn about how to be excellent within our company. We also do that to build the type of callous mindset that I think we need to address climate change at scale. So it's all connected. And the key things there that really, really apply to a fundraise, and this is kind of framed as, this is my mindset when I enter a fundraise. I try to really get dialed, think about my hydration, nutrition, and sleep. Legitimately, that is so important. I mean, it's so important all the time. When you're in a fundraise, when you're back-to-back, when you're sprinting, you need to be really, really on top of that. You need to be putting cards in your deck so that you are in a good spot with your mental health, with your approach, with how you come off every time. The second is really positive mental attitude. One of my favorite books that's about fundraising, even though he didn't know it when he wrote it, is called Deep Survival by Lawrence Gonzalez. It's neuroscience about why people survive in backcountry scenarios and some people don't. But it's really about how do you deal with high stress moments. In those cases, really physical, really intense. It's also pretty true with fundraising. And one of the biggest things is that folks who survive plane crashes or coming out of really intense spaces, they have a positive mental attitude. They're able to consistently take bad things that are happening to them and frame them in ways that are growth. So part of that is really doing memento mori, which is meditating on death in a fundraise, and just getting to a place where you expect the bad things to happen and you get excited about it. One of the things my co-founder and I do, when we get a no, we celebrate. Like, we do no's as celebrations. So we get amped up, right? Again, that's creating energy, that's creating momentum within the fundraise. Third thing is get to the next checkpoint. One of the most dangerous things you can do when you're ultra running is start thinking about the end of the race. So I was in Canada doing a 100-miler in summer of 23. And I got in this mindset where all I could think about was the finish line. And I was at mile 40 when that started. And over and over and over, I was thinking about finishing. I was thinking about the end result. I was thinking about the big Series A announcement, everybody celebrating me. And what I did is I lost perspective on being heads down and getting to the next checkpoint. And as it got worse and worse and worse, as my body deteriorated, I ended up quitting in that race. I dropped out at mile 87. And I really think a huge part of that was tied to thinking too far ahead. And so one of the biggest things that I really focus on for myself, and then when you think about your team in a fundraising dynamic, is not talking about the finish line. Like, you set the goal, this is what we're going after, but something that you get a lot in a race, you get this a lot in fundraising, is you get false signals. You'll hit a downhill, you'll have eaten a Cliff Bar, and all of a sudden you feel amazing, and you're super excited. You'll get some VC who will come to you and say, wow, we love what you're doing, we're a massive firm, we're super interested, let's dive in, let me see your data room. If you go out and you share that with your team, you share that with everybody, you are creating a dynamic to then start feeling bad in a month, or for that firm not to invest. And it's way more likely they won't invest than they will. And so one of the biggest things that we really focus on is get to the next checkpoint. Do not talk about being too far down the road. The last one, we were in the Sahara. That one is a 6-day race, so it's overnight. So every night we're at the bivvy, and one of the sort of race leaders is talking to us. And the next day was the biggest day of the race. It was a 50-mile day. It's the Sahara. Like, highs were around 125 expected that day. It's on sand. It's got the biggest climb of the race in it. And everybody's just nervous. And there's so many people who are spinning. They're like, hey, at this, at mile 28, there's a huge jebel that's like a 2,000-foot climb. And this is the longest distance between checkpoints at 35 to 45. And there's this huge, like rocky field that you got to go across. And everybody's spinning in this sort of like stress space. And the race leader was like, the sand dunes are going to be there. The rocks are going to be there. Take all that energy and just put it into your legs. Like, stop spending so much time spinning on that and put it into executing. And I think about that all the time in fundraising, is the more that I as a founder can be somewhat here, it's always emotional ups and downs, obviously, but the more I can be close to level as bad things happen, as funders pull out, I'll give you this example. My birthday this year, we had one of our funders. My birthday is the same as Taylor Swift's, just so in case anyone's curious, wants to send packages next year, I'd love that. It's in December, and we were at this tail end of our Series A fundraise. We had one of the biggest investors who was coming into our round pull out. Called me, said, we're out. We were like final, already through legal with them. They already had wire information. They pulled out $3 million. 2 other investors followed and said, hey, we're out. I lost $5 million in about 2 hours. It's a tough birthday, not my favorite birthday of all time. But the biggest point there is that because I'd been putting in the energy to be ready for those things, that sucked. I was pretty upset about it, but I was upset about it for like 24 hours. And the energy, the frustration with that, I channeled right back in, and in the next 3 days had pulled all of that money back from different investors. And so again, preparing yourself and really focusing not on the sort of negative spin, but really on the focus and the positive. So that's one principle of fundraising. The second is really thinking about how you are going to build a process to get better incrementally. So again, this goes to what are the key things I think about before I go into a fundraise. I think one of the things that has made me successful and gone from didn't know anything about fundraising to know a lot is really being able to have good processes to get better at the actual process. Do that in a really circumspect way. Try to really understand holistically how I operate. So the first is when you go into a fundraise, don't just go into a fundraise. Before you go, establish your self-reflection process. How are you going to do it? We're all different people. You have your own ways that you self-reflect. For me, that is, I do a journal every night. I then read that in the mornings. So at the end of every day, I'm like reflecting on what I learned. I hit that in the mornings. I also run after action reports on any serious like investor conversations. I am always trying to record myself so that I can rewatch. I have developed a group of people who I send that to get feedback on that speaking, on how it goes. I've also really focused on being my own coach. So this has been something that has been a big breakthrough for me is I was really struggling. I was talking to hundreds of investors. We were like kind of getting traction, but we just couldn't figure out these fundraises. And I was talking to mentors, I was talking to folks in the space, and they were giving me advice, and it was fine. But it was like, it's general advice, because they didn't have the context. They didn't get it. They didn't really understand what I needed. And finally, I was like, all right, I'm gonna stop asking people to tell me what I need to hear, and I'm gonna tell myself what I need to hear. And so I started this practice. Have any of you heard of WhatsApp? Okay, so that's pretty big here. That's great. So I use WhatsApp, and what I do is I leave myself voice notes. I switch on into coach mode, like, all right, I know myself. What do I need right now? What are the things that I need to push on? I just had 2 pitches today. What were my misses? I will then leave myself a voice note, and I listen to it the next day, right? Or I will give myself a prompt in that voice note for journaling the next day. So building out that really focused, be your own coach mode has been huge. And part of that is it's just getting good at like splitting yourself between, hey, this is me, Ben, the executor, and this is me, Ben, the coach who's trying to help myself there. Like we all have so much knowledge of ourselves. It's really, really powerful. I will say I do that for fundraising. Sort of doing that for everything. It's amazing. It's a great time. And then the last one is something that, again, is part of my fundraising practice. This is also really part of my life practice and our company building practice is meta time. So one of my fundamental focuses in life is I think that we spend time thinking about how do we want to live. We think, what are my values? How do I want to execute? What am I trying to learn or grow on in these specific areas? But then we really struggle to connect those things into like everyday life. We struggle to feel connected to those values in sort of the little moments in our lives. And so I use this practice of meta time, which is 1 hour a week where I've built a checklist where I'm quickly revisiting those values and then I'm mapping those values on my time. And I'm thinking about how do I integrate and come back to the things I'm trying to grow and learn on into my schedule. So that's what I do with fundraising as well, where at the start of the week, I will be really clearly mapping out when do I do my self-reflection? What's one of the first things to go if you don't make time for it? Stuff like that. And if you don't make that time, you're not getting better. And if you can change that rate, you get a ton of value. So I do that at the weekly level. And this is a scientifically proven chart with tons of data that I didn't just make this morning. But this is how I conceptualize the power of really focusing on process. So standard founder, like you're a first-time founder, you go into a fundraise, you're gonna talk to a bunch of VCs, you're gonna learn a bunch of stuff, and you're gonna get better at fundraising over time. But if you focus on the process of getting better not the results of your fundraise, you are then going to get much better at fundraising over time. And so, again, this is just to really emphasize investing in that self-reflective process on the front end is really, really valuable. I'd say that's been critical for me with fundraising. It also applies to anything you're taking under, building that out on the front end and focusing on the process, not the results. Tying this back to ultra running, a Canadian ultra marathon where I pulled out at mile 87, I knew that I had quit. It was the first time in my life that I felt like I had more in the tank and I quit because things were hard. And I woke up the next day, that was the farthest I'd ever run in my life. I just ran 87 miles and I was so negative. I was so ashamed. I felt terrible. I felt like I hadn't done anything. And I was in this really negative headspace. And so obviously I immediately signed up for another 100-miler. So I'm gonna go back at this. And I was kind of in that toxic, beat yourself up, grind through it attitude for about a month. And I was training super hard. And then I had this epiphany that actually focusing on the end, focusing on running 100 miles, that's what killed me. What I needed to do was focus on the process. And so what I started doing is I came into the next race with a complete focus on all I want to do is to be able to look myself in the mirror and say, I ran a great process. Maybe I get 20 miles in and I'm out. Maybe I get to 80 miles in and I drop. But if I can look myself in the mirror and say that, that's the actual goal. Same thing with fundraising. If you focus on that, if you focus on, did I run an amazing process? That completely changes your paradigm and how you execute on these things. And so what happened is that at mile 87, I was having some really intense pain. I was throwing up everywhere. Exactly what had happened at the last race, literally to the mile. And I had in my head, I'd been thinking about this forever, and I was like, all right, this time all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take one more step, and I'm gonna do that. And if that's it, that's fine, but I'm gonna take that one next step and I'm gonna be proud of that effort. I took another and another, and I dropped my fastest miles of the race, and I totally broke through. It was this amazing moment, finished the race, it was awesome. So same thing with fundraising, is that when you focus on the process, when somebody tells you no, that's actually not what you're evaluating yourself on. What you're evaluating yourself on is, did I do an amazing job today? Did I learn really well? Did I make the type of accretive gains that I'm looking for in myself to become better at this next time? So that has been a massive mindset shift for me. Instead of venerating a big number or a big name VC, really venerating the process of learning. And that totally changes your emotional energy with it. It depressurizes things. And ultimately, we all do better when we feel less pressure and more confidence, which we'll talk about. All right, high to hide. Does anybody know what this stands for? Any guesses? Great. Well, I'll share then. High to hide is how you do anything is how you do everything. So this, again, is one of my life principles. This is also how I really engage in fundraising. And what that's about is all of those little micro pieces, all of the process, being really, really dialed on that, super, super, super important. So I'm gonna go through this a little bit more tactically. Key things, excellent process when you prep into a fundraise, having a really dialed customer journey, and thinking about all the different dynamics that you actually need there. Having a single source of information tracking is so, so important. Asking for feedback. Things, when we think about things that change the slope of the line of learning, are you getting good feedback? Doing that well, super, super, super important. One of my favorite questions to ask there, when you're looking for feedback from VC, end of a first meeting, I will almost always ask this. I'll say, hey, you've learned a little bit more about us. What do we need to get right to win? What do we need to get right as a company? What I'm basically asking for is, what do you think our gaps are? Where are your snags? But it's subtle framing that pushes the VC to say, oh, you're gonna need to really scale supply and do that this way. So it frames it more as solutions, you're gonna have to get these things right, rather than these are what are gonna get in your way. What that does though, is it gives you feedback. Great, now I know where VCs are getting snagged. How do I update my pitch so that's there next time? And the last one is just really good process on levels of the data room. So I'm going to go through these super quick. This is our live, real Series A tracker that we built in a fancy program called Google Sheets. Helped us raise $18.5 million. So you don't need something fancy, you just need good process, and you need to run things effectively. The first is just really defining roles. I'm fortunate enough at this stage to have a bunch of support in the fundraising process. Early stages, that's less true. I would say from a role definition perspective, especially early stages, if you're an early stage founder, I highly, highly, highly encourage one founder to own the whole process and the other founders to be in like cheer mode. Your job is to like build the founder who's doing the fundraise up and obviously to run the company. When you try to have multiple folks involved, it becomes really hard. The context is different. Like you really need to get in flow to do these things really, really well. So defining roles, super, super important. That's something that as you get later stage is also very important as you have deeper diligence. What we try to do is you need somebody who is getting dialed in on their pitch really, really effectively, the folks who are updating materials really effectively, and then the folks who are running the process really effectively. Tracking round composition is something that we have in our tracker. Obviously, who is investing, how much have they invested, what is the status, just staying really dialed on that. Building out effective sequencing, again, to this point of prepare for a fundraise, pick a time, go all in, get your things right on the front end, is sequence really effectively. So we focus a lot on, all right, we're gonna build our documents first, we're gonna dial in our process, we're gonna do soft outreach, so we're gonna warm up our network, we're gonna go out, we're gonna share a win, we're gonna talk to folks, we're gonna sort of come front of mind, and we're not gonna be fundraising. We'll talk more about these dynamics later, but a part of this, being a little bit coy with VCs is, I'm not fundraising. You know, it's like, I don't need your money. I'm not fundraising. You're warming them up, you're getting them interested, and then you're dialing in your documents, your wins, so that you can hit them all in sequence, because the key in many parts of a fundraise is momentum, and so you've got to really push that. The next one, this is like a home run for me, is just the quick follow-ups library. So this is the link where, this is the sort of database of links where after every single meeting, investors basically have the same questions. So what you develop is you develop key sets of collateral that answer those questions. And one of the biggest things that you need to do for momentum is be very dialed on your follow-ups, push things, create momentum, be like, hey, we heard this from you, we created this document, might have already been created, maybe not, nobody knows, but we send follow-ups really quick. Having the database of all your links, one place, updated collateral is critical. My first couple fundraisers, I didn't do this. I was constantly updating my deck. I was getting questions from investors and then having to shift it over time. Huge, huge, huge value add. We have a master tracker. So we now have talked to 533 different investors over 5 years. That's a lot. That's a huge volume of investors. Again, part of that has been because I see part of my job as getting fundraising 101. So I've been optimizing to take conversations that as a second-time founder or right now, I will not take anywhere near that many conversations. But I need to do that. I didn't have the literacy in the space. I didn't have the reps, so I was putting the hours in. Tracker is very, very important. I don't think I need to really sell you all on this, but simple things like tracking, great, did my first wave email go out? Did that warming up the network? Hey, I was thinking about you, we're thinking about potentially raising a round, just had a big win, like would love to catch up. Like, did that email go out? Great. Did that convert into a meeting? Are we scheduled? Do we need follow-up? All of that needs attention and tracking. This is basically CRM functionality. You could use a CRM if you're really dialed in that. We use Google Sheets, very easy. All the notes are really, really critical. Obviously, tracking those, keeping those up to speed. And one of the biggest things I think about generally, if you are somebody who enables startups, if you're somebody who invests in startups, if you're a founder yourself, you don't probably know exactly what you're going to be doing in 5 or 10 years. My guess, I don't know what I'm going to be doing in 5 or 10 years. I've got some dreams, I've got real hopes. Creating things that have like long-term outside value in life is so, so, so important. So we take this very, very seriously, and I take this very, very seriously because this is a thing that at my next company, at the next thing I'm building in 10 years, really developing a database, right? And what that does is that creates more network value. And so this is something I think about all the time on the climate side. As we think about trying to build a better world and a better economy, the more effectively that we can share our networks, the better. So I actually think this is a mandate for everybody in this room, is to get good at owning and making your own network clear so that you can send it out and make that really simple. So we have 2 versions of that master tracker that we keep live at all times. We have an internal version with the notes and the conversations and all the details, reactions, don't talk about this, actually not that favorable on these folks for X, Y, and Z reason. And then we have an external one that really simply enables folks to share. So if another founder comes to me and says, hey, can you make some VC intros for me? I would love to talk to these types of folks. What I say is, look at this list, tell me who you'd want to talk to, prioritize it, and come back, right? So making sure that you have the thing that's really easy to share. That's also super, super important for network partners. So for folks who are enabling startups and have connections, one of the key things I would push any startup thinking about fundraising to have a very clear list, because that's what you need to send out to your network, and you need to track your intros within that. So just having an internal and external version, super, super helpful. Okay, so that is hide. How you do anything is how you do everything. And that focus is that on all of those documents, at each of those steps, we try to be really dialed, we try to be really excellent, and we try to focus on the process, not the end game. The last piece that we do, and this is sort of a data room, this is how we do it, and we found great results. So the data room ask and kind of the cycle of a fundraise, people want to get to know your company, they want to dive deeper, they're getting really serious, and they're pulling together an investment memo. And then there's actually, have given you a term sheet, and they're going to do real due diligence. We try to tranche that data really simply. So our first level 1 data room is just like a kick-ass follow-up email that has deck, financial model, video, and an overview. So that is dialed, that is pre-drafted. We are ready to share that. You add a little bit of context at the top of that, and you get that out immediately after every single meeting. So that's our first level of information that anyone will see when they enter our company. Some folks, I'll just say this for myself, some folks index really high on NDAs and doing that. I don't, certainly not for these early stages. Generally, I believe that no VC is going to look at a company and certainly at this level of information and do anything with that. So that can add a lot of friction in the process. I don't do NDAs. You can make your own choices there. Second one is another fancy tool. This one's Google Docs. So crazy innovative stuff over here. But just having your data room as doc links to secure files in Dropbox. It's so simple. People pay all this money and think about all these fancy data room things. That's so much easier to read than a complicated software system that somebody has to create an account for and enter into things. And so what we do is you have your first meeting, you have a pitch, we're going to follow up with these first docs in email. And then usually you have a second pitch. Ideally, you're getting deeper, you're getting in with a partner, you're getting in with somebody more senior, and they say, hey, we want to really dive. Boom, here's the data dump of all of your business docs. It's easy, it's organized, they can go through it. I would say something that we've done that's been amazing, videos of the team, 30 to 90 seconds, different folks on your team talking about their role, a key business opportunity, a key customer. It just adds color as you go through it. It helps people understand the team in a much bigger way. It's also most startups don't do that, so making it more interesting and more unique is really valuable. So second is really level 2 key business docs. And then the third is it's just all of the detail. So this is all of our cap table information, all the complicated NSOs, our stock plan, acquisition documents from the past, all of the detail that legal would actually need to go through. Again, all the links housed within a Google Sheet, and then those go into secure folders. So that one we take more seriously. Key thing here, getting each of those levels set up is so, so valuable. Because when you're engaging with VCs, either they're controlling the process and making the asks, or you're controlling the process and saying, hey, we're ready to unlock the next level. So one of the things that we position, and we'll get into positioning as some of my later principles of fundraising, is we're always positioning, we're kind of being, again, a little bit coy. It's We really like this, but we want to learn more from you before we're ready to share more information, right? Before we're ready to unlock the next step. It creates this like a little bit of arm's length. You're not being desperate. You very clearly have your pieces. But then as soon as you're ready to dive, you're dialed, you're sharing information really fast. And keep in mind, right, VCs see so many companies all the time. And ultimately, pretty much what all of them are trying to produce is an investment memo. So we tried to structure our data room with the docs that would plug in directly into an investment memo. We also sort of pre-write that. We pre-write an investment memo, and then we cut sections of that into our data room as well. We try to make it super easy for a VC to take us, who doesn't know us, and position us that well, really well for the team. Last dynamic, again, going to these fundamental dynamics that I think is really important, is that VCs, you end up talking to a partner or an associate, they have to go convince their IC or their senior leadership of what you're doing. So you're playing this bad game of telephone. So again, as much as you can clarify in your docs, the better. Next principle, real relationships. One of the biggest things, and I'll talk about this in a sec, there are things you can do to position, there are hacks, there's all of these things, but the most important thing is building real relationships. Again, to long-term value, your network is one of the most valuable things. And no matter what you do, you go do something different, completely change your career, do whatever, your network is key for that. So there's a few different things that we think about when building real relationships. The first is to get to know quickly. One of the best pieces of advice I ever heard as a founder and was given to me is that you are basically trying to take, if you look at those 100 VCs and you need 1 or 3 of them to say yes, and the other 97% are going to say no, you're trying to get that 97% out of your time and energy as fast as possible. Get them out of there. Don't spend your time with them unless you're in that first phase of trying to learn, then you can use that as a learning rep. When you're actually running a process, you should get those out of there. So the biggest thing there, and how this ties into real relationships, is I care about who I work with a ton. I want to work with good people. I want to work with somebody who's going to bring value. I want to work with people who are actually reflective in the ways that they work. And if you're not that, I don't want to work with you. If you're an amazing firm, but you're not a good person, I'm not interested. So I'm trying to understand that very, very fast. So get to know quickly. Again, what that does is that positions you as a founder as somebody with scrutiny, and it's legit. You're really trying to figure out, is this a good fit? Is this somebody I can build this with? Is this somebody who's going to be there when things are hard? Second one is sending postcards. That's me. I love snail mail. I don't know who has gotten something in the mail, a nice handwritten note, and been mad about it. I've never been mad about that. It's amazing. You know who doesn't send mail? Probably almost everybody. Sending a postcard as a follow-up, sending a, hey, this was really game-changing, that's something that we try to do all the time with our team for customers, for network supporters, and in Fundraise, it's great. The main point there is that's authentic to me. I love handwritten notes. I love handwritten letters. It's a thing I do all the time. Sending postcards is like an expression of that. So again, building those real relationships, and that creates connection. That creates real connection with your people. Third, which I started to touch on a little bit, is people over firms. So something that I think founders often get lost in is they're like, man, I really want to work with A16Z, the biggest ones, or I want to be with Sequoia, or we just had this great meeting with NEA and I really want to be there. The reality is, your experience as a founder is mostly going to be defined by the partner that you are working with and the person who's going to be your direct point of contact, who potentially is going to sit on your board, who's going to actually be that person. So I'll give the example for our Series A. So we had several different term sheets. We were evaluating the firms that we wanted to take in, and we ended up selecting Volo Earth as our lead. They're a little bit of a smaller name, not quite as well known in the space, but the partner who we were working with is incredible. He's incredibly dedicated. He does all of these sort of self-reflective things. He's very, very good when things are hard. He's got the right mindset, and he's somebody who I know I can learn from a ton, who's going to help me turn the corner, get better, close the gaps, and all the things that I have to work on. And I'm super, super glad that we did that. And one of the biggest things that we just are obsessed with is get the right people, don't focus on the firms. Last one, when you think about real relationships, it's one of my life rules: show up for weddings, show up for funerals, show up when you're going to close with somebody. If you're going to bring them onto your cap table, spend some time in person. That's also like an amazing way to get people to meet. And especially as you get later, this is a good little hack with working with venture capitalists and you need to actually be flexible to do this, but saying like, hey, I'll be in New York on these dates, would love to meet with you if you're talking to an associate and a partner because I'm in town. So that's a big way to do that. I did that yesterday with the big Series B firm. It was awesome. We got a meeting with much more senior leadership. We were in town and we were able to be there. Even if you're not planning to be there necessarily, that can be a good way to sort of push a closing meeting. Be at the cool table. Third one. I am fully convinced that raising funds, engaging with VCs is basically Mean Girls. You're at like middle school, high school dining hall. It's a jungle out there. And the central dynamic that is happening that you are trying to balance with all these different pieces, with these conversations, with the positioning that you're doing in this space, is you're either at the cool table and somebody's trying to come and sit with you, or you're walking around with your tray in hand, trying to sit down and trying to get VC's attention and energy. It's really important to be at the cool table when you're engaging with VCs. That's what I've learned, and it's really, really important to do that in a bunch of different ways. So the biggest thing there is having no desperation. Like one thing that I've done and have been very guilty of is like not being ready to walk away. So I'll talk about our seed round. So we had been talking to lots and lots of investors. We had been getting so many people say man, you have a lead investor. We love what you're doing. We'll follow in for sure. We're in for 2 million, whatever it is. Nobody was actually closing. No one was writing us a term sheet. We were not at wiring stage. And I was getting more and more desperate. I was pulling out all the stops. I was like trying to get people to talk. I was like, hey, like take a shot on us. Like, please, like, can I get another meeting? Can I talk to you over here? And I was feeling mortified because our company had 3 weeks left. Like we were in this moment of, all right, this thing that I've been working on, these dreams that I have, the impact that we could have is at the finish line. It was really scary. And I was in myself feeling that desperate energy, right? We all know what it feels like when somebody is like desperate and kind of clinging, trying to get your attention. That's absolutely what I was putting out in the world with VCs. And it's understandable. It's like an understandable place to feel, especially when you've been in a fundraise for a long time. And what I did is I kind of had this moment where I was like, all right, it's not working. It's not working. Got to figure it out. And I had this new introduction to a VC, and I was like, okay, going to try it. We're going to try and see if this new tactic works. And the new tactic was, I'm going to act as if everything is great. I'm going to be so confident. I'm going to completely shift my energy. And so I had this first conversation with that investor, and I basically said, look, if you get me a term sheet by the end of the week, I'll stop talking to all these other investors we've been getting really close with. Did I actually think I was going to get a term sheet from another investor? No. We were talking about it, all true. You should not lie. We see all of these things where Forbes 30 under 30 people are committing fraud. Don't commit fraud. You can position things well. Don't commit fraud. And just shifted that energy where I was like, all right, term sheet by the end of the week, or we'll walk away. The other thing that does is it helps you get to a no faster. If they're not a good fit, great. If they're really excited about your business, they'll move fast. And as you get to later rounds, that timeline needs to extend. But basically what happened is we zoomed in. We had like 5 meetings on a very accelerated schedule that week. And I had a term sheet in my hand by Thursday. And that led to us bringing in other people and doing different things to actually close our seed round. And so what's really key there is shifting that energy. Don't be desperate. Last one that I've noticed from the founder's perspective that I will say is like VCs, not all of them, not going to point any fingers at the VCs in the room here, is that they like want to be cool. Like again, we're thinking about middle school lunch here, right? Like they want to be cool. Like they want to be around it. You as a founder have a huge asset. You're building an amazing company. You've got so much potential. You are doing something amazing. You've got a team. Maybe you have an office. Maybe you have cool swag. Whatever it is, like bring the VCs into that energy. Like help them come and access that The thing we do there, most common, is we will just invite them to events. They love it. Like, they're so excited to be in and around companies. I mean, we have let some VCs drive skid steers, driving bulldozers and pushing some logs around. It's amazing. Gets them so excited about what we're doing because it's cool, right? And I think people really want to do things that are interesting. And VCs usually join companies because they're very interested in actually engaging with the product. In case OSHA is here, we didn't actually let any VCs drive bulldozers. All right, next principle. Part of this, and it's related, but is putting forward your most authentic and boldest self. So again, when you go into a fundraise, the energy that you want to bring, you want to build yourself into this, is the most confident, bold, intense version of you. Early stage VCs are betting on you. They're not betting on anybody else, they're betting on you. Part of why no's suck is they're not really saying no to your company, they're saying no to you. They're saying, I do not believe you can solve this problem set. And so coming in and being ready, being in that confident space where you can really buoy these things is key. So dress. Be yourself. Be like the most expressive version of that. For me, I grew up in a woods town of 200. I had never worn a suit until I was past Yale. My first day on campus at SOM, I showed up in a wilderness hoodie, a flannel undershirt, and jeans. Everybody else there was dressed to the nines, and I was like, oh my God, I feel so out of place here. And one of the amazing things with VCs is I've learned if I put on a collared shirt, a tie, something fancy, I have significantly worse conversations with them than when I wear a flannel and boots and my Carhartt jacket. And that's works because it's authentic to me. I live and breathe that every day. That's real. I'm not putting on a show. But I am leaning into what makes me unique. I'm not trying to conform. I'm not trying to be everybody else. I'm not trying to be a finance person. I'm trying to be a wood person who is building a wood company and who's doing that from a place of authenticity. So that's one. Lean into yourself, be expressive, do that. Send postcards, again, it's a really good idea. Clearly meant to put that on the slides twice because of how good of an idea it is. The third is play mentality. So this is one of the things that I found to be really helpful. Again, if you focus on the process and not the results, you can be proud of a day that actually went really bad because you did a great job. Same thing, bring some play into this. Bring some style, bring some swagger, bring some energy into the process of fundraising. It's hard, it sucks. Have some fun with it. You're out there trying to build a company, you're trying to bring that energy. I don't know what works, but I try stuff. I try a lot of different stuff. I'm going to share a few things that I have tried in the past. And then the last one is just be bold. Going back to that 1 to 30, what we really look for is you look for founders, and what VCs are looking for, founders with massive visions, with folks who can disrupt, who can change, who can impact. The boldest version of anybody in this room can do that. But the more protective, scared versions of ourselves, they're not going to go do that. So really be bold there. And I think the key thing is for you, again, trying to tie this back, when I think about a lot of my self-coaching, leaving WhatsApps, trying to build that process of getting myself into the right mindset, is about putting myself in that position before I enter the meeting. So, as a little bit of sharing here, these are some things that I've done that I think are a little bit bold. So the question I ask myself is, WWAND. What would Adam Newman do? CEO of WeWork, incredible fundraiser, a lot of complexity, maybe not a great business builder, maybe a criminal. We don't know. I'm not here to say. But that man, if anybody has seen the documentary, heard him talk, in his early days of fundraising, is the most confident person in the world. I mean, this guy, he could sell wood to a tree. He is just out there pitching the craziest stuff, massive, crazy stuff. Even after WeWork's complete collapse, he went to Andreessen and raised $350 million because he's so convicted, right? And so that's the space that you want to be in. It is critical, and again, we'll come back to this, started with it, we'll come back to this at the end. Nothing substitutes building a good company. Nothing substitutes good process. Nothing substitutes having a critical, self-reflective process where you're actually growing, where you're actually understanding those things. But if you can couple that with the confidence of Adam Newman, you can build something amazing. So we're always trying to tap into that. So already gave that example. This is the dress. This is like what I try to look like. I realize I'm wearing basically the same thing today. It's a little embarrassing. But that's like what we try to do. I'm always trying to take VC pitches in the shop. Like I'm trying to take it with wood around us. Like I'm trying to take it in a space that gets VCs engaged. Those first questions are so much more interesting when you get on a call and somebody's got like, hey, I gotta go turn off our wood miser over here so you can actually hear me speak. That gets people tied in. That makes it memorable. Again, the dynamic, VCs are seeing 8 to 10 pitches a day. They're talking to so many different people. Be different, be bold, be you. I have our pitch deck printed out, laser engraved on a piece of our wood. Anytime I have an in-person meeting, I'm walking in, I'm slapping that on their desk, I'm handing it to them, we're talking about it. This is what I hold up and talk through, right, in a meeting. Why? Because it's different, because it's interesting, because it tells a story, because you're able to do that. So think about your business, whatever you're building, figure out some creative way to do that. Again, try it. I once tried to do a whole pitch deck with a lot of different slides. Turns out, really clunky. You're carrying way too much wood around. It's all in bad order. Did not work. It was not a good outcome. This one, the video isn't going to play, but this is me in the middle of the 100-mile race that I finished, which was during our seed round. I was at mile 75, and I pitched a VC. I was running in the middle of it. It's like, hey, we should work with you. Like, would love to do this. If it doesn't work, great. What that is like a connection point with them. I knew they were runners. I knew that there was a connection there. And I'm just trying to share myself. Like, I think ultra running directly connects into my ability to lead our company. And I'm sharing that. I'm sharing that openly. And you're creating a real relationship, right? Like that's something I love and care about. You're connecting with them, and that's really important. I will say I'm always, just for founders here in particular, I'm always trying to get to text or call with VCs rather than being on email. Obviously, document sharing and those pieces are really important, but I'm always trying to get into a space where I can talk and really connect with you. This is something. So Acel, great company, amazing VCs. We had a meeting in person, and we made a pretty dumb joke. It's kind of funny about how heavy their doors were. I mean, they've got like absolute gigantic doors that are ready to prevent a castle from being stormed at their offices in SF. And we were like, wow, we should create a company where we are, with the VC there, where we're investing in heavy doors. My follow-up email, like, hey, we're pivoting to a heavy door company, right? Her response, like, hey, this was honestly the best email subject lines I've ever had. Like, this made me laugh out loud. That type of engagement is key. Another one, I was having a VC who I really liked, who we were trying to get to invest, who we were pushing on, who was like interested but kind of being slow, and it was kind of like, all right, you in or you out? And we sent this like Yoda best, because they're in the George Lucas building in the Presidio. They've got Yoda out front. My CTO loves Yoda. He's pissed that I put this in the presentation, but that's okay. He's not here. And basically, that like reopened the conversation. We dove back in. We went much deeper. So again, these things where it's like you're playing, you're trying, you're testing it. Like, have fun with it. I thought this was funny. It's pretty stupid. It's also kind of funny. And so put that out there, I think, is really good. The second thing that I'd highlight in this, if you read the second side, is we don't want to pitch you. We want you to rake our strategy and execution over the coals. And if we don't survive, we just ask for feedback. Either way, we're moving forward. So again, I'm inviting, constantly trying to pull people in, like scrutinize us, pull us apart. Why won't this work? What assumption aren't we missing? Because I'm learning in that. I'm getting a ton of feedback about how we should think about company building, and because that's creating a positioning and a focus on execution, not on hype or the other pieces. Last one, this is one of the boldest tactics I've used. I was at a VC, and we already had like a round pretty much established, but I really liked this VC. And they were pretty interested, and I had a partner meeting with them in SF. And I walked into their office, sat down, it was like 5 people around the table, and I put 2 envelopes on the table, And then we just started the conversation. Didn't say anything, 2 envelopes on the table. Inevitably, we got a little bit into it, and they're like, what's up? What's up with the envelopes? And I was like, there's 2 different offers in here. One is incredibly bold and what we really want to take as a company. And the other is what our investors would want you to come in at in this round. If we get through today, if we feel like it's a good fit, if this conversation goes well and we're excited about you all and we think there's a fit here, I would love to let you pick. What that did is it created a dynamic of wanting to open something, uncertainty, what was in the envelopes, what does it look like? They were both the same. Don't tell anybody. But that allowed, again, just like a different process. It was really fun. Did they invest? No, they didn't end up investing. Did that actually advance us through the process, several more stages? It might have. Like, we got much deeper. We got to the sort of final stages with them, and they pulled out for sort of a fund mechanics reason. What that did is, again, it's like creating a different dynamic within a traditional space. Okay, the most important thing, over and over and over. I just went through a bunch of positioning. It's middle school. You can do these tactics. They're fun. They're great. Have the mindset. Prepare for it. Nothing replaces a great company. If you have a great company and you have a great fundraise, if you have metrics that are growing, things really happen. If you have a great company, but you're a poor fundraiser, you're going to miss out on a lot of opportunities. And if you've got a mediocre company and you're a great fundraiser, you might be Adam Newman. Couple of things. Nothing replaces growth. So focus on getting that right. Again, really being dialed in on your core metrics, especially in the early days. Get your metrics right. Tell the investors what the key metrics are, why they're important. Second is raise at a local maximum. I think this is always a really good idea, is that you want to raise at a moment where you are in an upswing. That's big. Don't play an ace if a 2 will do. We'll talk about that in a second. And then the last thing that I think is often important, especially for very early stage startups, I think a first round often can be really successful pre-metrics. So if you don't have, as soon as you start to have metrics, your metrics aren't enough. That's how every VC sees everything is, well, your revenue could be higher, your quarter growth could be higher, all of those pieces. And so often for that first round, like pre-metrics, but with great product, great team, very clear vision, that can be a great moment to raise. Okay, so this is how I think about information sharing with VCs. So this is a timeline where today is that first orange bar in the middle. And let's say if we're looking at the past, so you've got a key win and a product launch. Those are things that you've already done. Let's say you did those over the last couple months. Now you're at today. You probably got a big customer signing in a couple weeks. You've got a big revenue milestone a couple months out at the end of the quarter, and you know in 4 months you've got a big PR sales win. What tends to happen in the VC information sharing dynamic when you're in a fundraise is you are talking ahead of today. You are like talking like, hey, we're really close with this big customer. Things are like, we've got great traction there. That doesn't mean anything. Like, it hasn't happened yet. You're talking about like, oh, our revenue targets for this year are here, our PR sales, and so you're putting your emotional weight far ahead of where you're at. And what that does is that puts you at risk. VCs don't actually like that. They can see through that. They know that what matters is actual results, not what could happen. And so that's a big thing that we really try to avoid. This is where companies really should talk about their progress. And so again, like focusing not on the wins that are about to come, but on what you've already done. That's like a key part of this. But what we really try to do, and what I've seen a lot of seasoned founders do, is they talk about their progress and they hold that information until they're needed. So again, going back to a couple things, fundraising is all about wins, right? It's all about momentum. It's about creating that energy. And so something that we'll do is we will have a key product launch that we know is going out or is going live, and we might hold that. We might hold sharing that information or pushing that to VCs. Or we might know we just signed a huge customer, I'm going to keep that in my pocket until we're getting a bunch of progress with VC, and we can say, wow, we just launched this product. Hey, also this customer just signed with us, right? And you're going to be able to play those in a way that is much higher momentum. You've already done them, so you're not at risk of missing on your goals, and it allows you to really position things with VCs much more effectively. So that's one of the key things that I've learned is hold your wins, don't get ahead. And the last piece there that's always crazy is if you get ahead, and I've been ahead talking about the things that we're going to do and what's going to happen, you then have to get the next level of ahead again. Because, all right, well, last time we talked, you said you were talking about these 3 things, and now it's been a month. Like, what are the things out? And so you're still talking about the same stuff, but if you can pull that back to today, or ideally even like a little bit trailing, it's a much better way to share information with VCs. But really, the core here, you need to have a great company to do a great fundraise. All right. I don't know how much time we have. Do I have a time check? 15 minutes? Great. Well, happy to, maybe we'll just jump into overall questions. That's my talk. Those are some things that I've learned. I would love feedback. If anybody has those pieces, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn if I can connect or be helpful. LinkedIn is the most active, best way to sort of connect with me. You can find me there very easily. Thank you, and I would love to take any questions or be helpful how I can. Questions from folks? Yeah.
How did you reach out or find your first investor, like your first meeting? What was the process that you went through, or how did you connect with them?
Yeah, how did I find my first investor? How did I connect with them? So again, early stage when I didn't know anybody, I tried to network map. And again, I did this poorly then, but what I would do now is I would get prepared with my first couple of key documents. The 2 key documents you need are a blurb. What's your 3-sentence description of your company? And then what's the 4 to 6 slide overview? What is just the simple distillation of what you're doing, who you are, the basics. I would get that ready. I would then go to the people you know. I mean, we're in a room with a ton of people who have a ton of connections. And you essentially go out and you try to learn. And I think that the biggest thing there is you can try to ask and say, hey, would you introduce me to any of those? But I don't introduce founders to folks unless I know them really well, right? And so especially for those first steps, I would think about it much more as a network building exercise, which is, hey, I'm a young founder. I'm really trying to learn how to run this process. I have a couple of key questions from X, Y, and Z. I would love to learn from you, from VCs, from founders, from people in your network. You finish those conversations with a question of who should I talk to? Who should I talk to next? And what that does, you do that once, you do another follow-up conversation with them a month later, all of a sudden, they've met with you 2 times for, even if it's a half hour over the period of a month, all of a sudden I know you. I'm probably, if you do a good job in those meetings, maybe interested in making connections for you. So I would think about it really as network building, but in particular, again, to the point of reality, build real relationships and come at it from a place of curiosity. So rather than going, hey, how do I get somebody to give me money first? How do I learn? I think the old adage of you ask for money, you'll get advice. You ask for advice, you'll get money. It's really true. Yeah. Other questions? I just got a couple. Yeah.
I'll ask a question since others aren't. You alluded to the kind of survivor bias nature of you happen to be here on a stage because you've done well, and there are lots of other people who had different approaches. Some of them might have been better than some of yours, even though yours sound really, really universal. Reflect, know what you're trying to do, really, really good ideas. I'm curious if you, recognizing that survivor bias, if you would, how much of what your success you would attribute to the legitimately good practices you just described, that was remarkable, and how much you might attribute it to the chance nature of of life, and how folks can think about that. We can only control so much.
Yeah.
But what we can't control, we can try to do well in the process.
Totally. No, I think that is a spot on. I would say something I am incredibly aware of is I don't know everything, and I am also not in control. Like, I think this is one of the deep existential troubles we all have humans, is like kind of accepting that we don't actually have control of a lot of these exogenous forces. And so my focus has been, what can I control? How do I get better at that? How do I improve my probability of being ready when I get that chance meeting, to be in the right mindset, to have the right preparation? But you're completely right. And one of the things I think about all the time, so one of my favorite quotes about entrepreneurship, because it's been super, super true for us, is survive long enough to get lucky. And part of this is like, you just need to go and you need to figure out the next thing. And so, not to talk about ultra running too much, but it informs my whole mindset. Like, one of the things that I've experienced, so the 100 miler I finished after the one I failed, I felt awful at mile 40. I hit like a huge wall. Still had more than half of the race to go, 60 miles to go, and I was in a really, really bad spot. My like legs, I was just like really bad. And I ran for like 13 more miles. It started freezing, raining. And then I felt amazing. Like miles like 55 to 70 in that race, I was crushing. All I did was I kept going during that time. And then, I managed the things that I could control. And then I felt really different. And so I think that's also true in a fundraise. And to your point about survivorship bias, is it's like, if you can figure out how to keep going and you do your process well, again, you have to get other things right. You have to have a product that works. You have to have a company that's working. Things likely will work out. There's a chance that they won't. I think that's very true for us. Like, we've made a ton of progress. We've raised a ton of money. We've created a real impact today. We've not done it. We are not done. There's a very real chance, probably more likely than not, we don't succeed as a company. And so knowing that and owning that, I think is just true. So I don't know if I have a thought more than just to validate. I think it's completely true that we don't have control in many, many ways. Nice.
Thanks so much. I think this was really helpful to understand the power of a process. You mentioned the slide of having 533 investors you spoke to. Would also love to know how, beyond the fundraising process, how do you go about maintaining these relationships? And also, how do you incorporate it? One person can't do that alone. How do you incorporate it into your team and your organization?
Sure. Really, really good question. So a couple of thoughts there. One is, I'm always trying to, out of that 533, there's only a small handful who I am really excited about and trying to maintain a very close relationship with. There's a subset who I'm trying to maintain some sort of information exchange with. And then there's a bigger group who I am actually not trying to maintain a relationship with. And so part of that, and the way that we do that within the team, is we try to, again, create process and systems to focus on keeping your network warm. One of the things that we've realized, especially for impact-centric companies, is people want to help. Like, legitimately, they want to help. We just got a great introduction from my high school soccer coach, who is on my email list when I send out, like, hey, do you know any architects? Like, now we're working on this. Who do you know here? Or we're working on this piece of federal policy. Does anybody have a connection into, the DOD? Whatever it is, like, making those asks, making it simple. So the biggest piece there is like having a list and curating that really well. I think the second within team space is we try to do postcard Fridays. It's something that we are we've been a little soft on in the last couple months, but we're going to bring back really hard. We have a team retreat next week and everybody's writing postcards. Is that we try to make space to do these connection points with customers, with people. And so that's really, really important. And then I think the last thing, when we think about keeping a network warm and doing that, I find that sharing updates about life is a huge, huge part of that. And the more that you can connect and understand that is big. It's hard. You definitely can't do that with everyone. And so when I think about investors, I try to be pretty selective about who I'm going to go deep with. And that goes back to that real relationship piece, which is, if people aren't self-reflective, this is one of my questions that I ask every VC now that I meet with is, tell me about your own personal process of self-reflection. A lot of them can't answer that with any conviction or forethought. I'm not actually interested in working with you. I'm not really interested in working with somebody who's not trying to better themselves and not trying to grow and not trying to expand their own perspective. And so that then can help shrink that list and get the no's there so that you can actually really focus on the yeses. Great. A couple more questions? Yeah.
Thank you for sharing all those great
fundraising is hard. You probably did it in 2023. Any tidbits or anecdotes you want to share that you can share on how we face fundraising in hard times?
Great company. I think that's the key. I think that is likely true. Again, this is a little bit to me, and this is what I tell my team, is it's kind of that same idea of the market is going to do what the market is going to do. We need to control what we can control. We need to be ready for it, but we need to be really dialed in. So I think a few things. One is expecting longer processes. So that's getting that prep better, putting yourself in the mindset for a longer grind of a fundraise, I think is really important. I think the second is that I think it's about like the actual tactical thing that I've understood is if you can understand the fundraise or the life cycle of a VC's fund, particularly in down cycles, there's still folks who raise capital and they need to deploy that capital. And so one of the first things I ask before any meetings now, as a first-time founder or early stage, you'd have the first meeting, is really trying to understand what is their deployment cycle, how active are they, what does that look like? And then obviously picking folks who are very active or have dry powder that they need to move out, because that pressure can sort of counterbalance a market force. And then I think the last thing is, so much of this is positioning, right? So we are a circular economy, regenerative supply chain that is helping to bring low carbon materials to the market and build software tools to help tech enable carbon data and transform lifecycle analysis within the built environment. We're also an American first manufacturing, local jobs creating, next generation tech enablement of a legacy industry. It's the same company, we're doing the same thing, our impact is the same. And so positioning and really understanding like how do you fit within the context of what is coming and within the current marketscape. All right, maybe last one, if there's one burning one. Yeah.
This was a wonderful presentation. Thanks so much for
Yeah.
I think the process is really one of the biggest things that I've taken away from this presentation. Thinking about being like a really early stage founder in terms of having an idea, but knowing that you need like manufacturing and operations processes behind that to
Yeah.
really convince people of the vision. Can you reflect maybe on like your really early days and how like you might relate that challenge in terms of convincing someone of the idea when you don't have the product in place just yet?
Yeah. So the question is, how do you convince somebody of the idea when you don't have the product in place yet as a very early stage founder? I would reframe that question at the front end. Don't convince them of the idea, convince them of you. Because fundamentally, like, especially early stage, no offense, you don't know what you're building. I didn't know at all. Like, we were so wrong. We thought we were building this and it changed and it changed. And that's pretty much true for every single company ever, is there's big shifts, especially in those early years, of what you're actually focused on, how you find product market fit. And what you need to prove is that you are an unstoppable force who is going to break through those problem barriers. And so again, to those things about being bold, about being confident, about having a great process, that's part of how you communicate that to somebody who is going to bet on you and give you money. To the point about sticking with it when things are hard, a lot of founders stop, right? And like a lot of VCs lose a lot of money because founders stop working on a problem. Proving that you're in it for the long haul is another really big one. So to get a little bit more tactical, the way we think about it, and this goes back to how we started, is we initially thought we were going to address problems at the city level by working at nonprofits to essentially help fund trees in cities more effectively. That's what we thought we were doing. We now build software for like sawmills. And we do a bunch of other stuff, and there's still connection there, but they're very far apart. As soon as we started to realize, hey, there's all of this wasted wood, what if we could build a platform to save it at scale? Rather than trying to set up massive manufacturing, build out the full supply chain, what we did is we did a Kickstarter of cutting boards from our apartment in New Haven. And like what that allowed us to learn a ton. We got a bunch of excitement. I know there's some people in this room who've got an OG cutting board, so save those. The market value going up on those. It's a legacy item. But we got into market. And so this is an analogy that I learned from Peter Boyd, who's a lecturer here, which is if you're going to build a car, you can either design the wheels, you can design the chassis, you can build the seats, you can set up manufacturing, and 5 years down the road, you have a car that is ready to launch. Or you can build a skateboard and you can sell it, you can get a market, you can get customers, you can build a brand, you can learn what you did wrong, and then you build a scooter, and you do the same thing, and it's in market, and you go out, and then you build an electric scooter, and then you build a car 5 years later. But during that time, you've actually learned about all of the process. You've proven your ability to sell things, which if you're building a company, that's like really, really critical. And you've proven your ability to drive momentum and actually build a team underneath you that is doing something real and not just perspective. So in the distillation of that, what I would say is lean hard into the things that you can do that prove what you are doing and how you are doing it. So like prove to an investor that you've gone and learned, or whatever your product is, like some creative idea to test the market in sales. I mean, last anecdote I'll give there, which is a classic, is Airbnb's Obama O's. Do we know this story? So Airbnb, obviously, not a cereal company. Early days, they're at the Democratic National Convention, 2008, and they were trying to like get their product out there. They were trying to sell rooms, and it wasn't really working because they couldn't get enough press and publicity. And so what they did is they launched Obama O's, like a small cereal company that, not a company, but they just ran a product line of like cereal. And then they sold it, and it went really well. It went viral. They got a ton of press. And what it did is it showed that they could do it. And so YC then was like, wow, these folks ran into problem after problem. They did something kind of crazy over here that was bold, that was unique, that was dynamic, but it worked and it demonstrated the possibility. So that's not to say you should go launch a cereal company to do it, but anything you can do to demonstrate success at the beginning, and then also to demonstrate great process and that you are an unstoppable force in what you're doing. Cool. All right, y'all. Well, reach out if you have any questions. Really appreciate the time. Thank you for having me.